Lady Chatterley's Lover with me, Morel Bernard. So let's continue with Lady Chatterley's Lover. The men didn't want one. They just didn't really want a woman. Even Michaelise didn't. And the bounders who pretended they did and started working the sex game, they were worse than ever. It was just dismal. And one had to put up with it. It was quite true. Men had no real glamour for a woman. If you could fool yourself into thinking they had, even as she had fooled herself over Michael, that was the best you could do. Meanwhile, he just lived on and there was nothing to it. She understood perfectly well why people had cocktail parties and jazzed and charlestoned till they were ready to drop. You had to take it out some way or other, your youth, or it ate you up. But what a ghastly thing, this youth. You felt as old as Methuselah, and yet the thing fizzed somehow and didn't let you be comfortable. A mean sort of life, and no prospects. She also wished she had gone off with Nick, and, well, or almost wished she had gone off with Nick, and made her life one long cocktail party and jazz evening. Anyhow, that was better than just mooning yourself into the grave. On one of her bad days, she went out alone to walk in the wood, ponderously, heeding nothing, not even noticing where she was. The report of a gun, not far off, startled and angered her. Then, as she went, she heard voices and recoiled. People. She didn't want people. But a quick ear caught another sound and she roused. It was a child, sobbing. At once she attended. Someone was ill-treating a child. She strode swinging down the wet drive, her sullen resentment uppermost. She felt just prepared to make a scene. Turning the corner, she saw two figures and the drive beyond her. The keeper and a little girl in a purple coat and moleskin cap crying. "Ah, shut it up, the false little bitch," came the man's angry voice. And the child sobbed louder. Constance strode nearer with blazing eyes. The man turned and looked at her, saluting coolly, but he was pale with anger. "What's the matter? Why is she crying?" demanded Constance, peremptory but a little breathless. A faint smile like a sneer came on the man's face. "Nay, you mun ax," he replied, callously in broad vernacular. Connie felt as if he had hit her in the face and she changed colour. Then she gathered her defiance and looked at him, her dark blue eyes blazing rather vaguely. "I asked you," she panted. He gave a queer little bow, lifting his hat. "You did, your ladyship," he said. Then, with a return to the vernacular, "But I canna tell ya." And he became a soldier, inscrutable, only pale with annoyance. Connie turned to the child, a ruddy, black-haired thing of 9 or 10. "What is it, dear? Tell me. Why are you crying?" she said, with the conventionalized sweetness suitable. More violent sobs, self-conscious. Still more sweetness on Connie's part. There, don't you cry. Tell me what they've done to you." An intense tenderness of tone. At the same time she felt in the pocket of her knitted jacket and luckily found a sixpence. Don't you cry then, she said, bending in front of the child. See what I've got for you. Sobs, snuffles, a fist taken from a blubbered face and a black, shrewd eye cast for a second on the sixpence. Then more sobs, but subduing. There. Tell me what's the matter, tell me, said Connie, putting the coin into the child's chubby hand, which closed over it. Is it the pussy? Shudders of subsiding sobs. What pussy, dear? After a silence, the shy fists clenching on sixpence pointed to the bramble brake. There. Connie looked, and there, sure enough, was a big black cat, stretched out grimly, with a bit of blood on it. Oh, she said in repulsion. A poacher, your ladyship, said the man, satirically. She glanced at him angrily. No wonder the child cried, she said. If you shot it when she was there, no wonder she cried. He looked into Connie's eyes, laconic, contemptuous, not hiding his feelings. And again Connie flushed. She felt she had been making a scene. The man did not respect her. What is your name? She said playfully to the child. Won't you tell me your name? Sniffs. Then, very effectively, in a piping voice, Connie Mellors. Connie Mellors? Well, that's a nice name. And did you come out with your daddy and he shot a pussy? But it was a bad pussy. The child looked at her with bold, dark eyes of scrutiny, sizing her up and a condolence. I wanted to stop with my gran, said the little girl. Did you? But where is your gran? The child lifted an arm, pointing down the drive. At the cottage. At the cottage? And would you like to go back to her? Sudden, shuddering quivers of reminiscent sobs. Yes. Come then. Shall I take you? Shall I take you to your gran? Then your daddy can do what he has to do. She turned to the man. It is your little girl, isn't it? He saluted and made a slight movement of the head in affirmation. I suppose I can take her to the cottage? Asked Connie. If your ladyship wishes. Again, he looked into her eyes with that calm, searching, detached glance. A man very much alone and on his own. Would you like to come with me to the cottage, to your gran, dear? The child peeped up again. Yes, she simpered. Connie disliked her, the spoilt, false little female. Nevertheless, she wiped her face and took her hand. The keeper saluted in silence. Good morning, said Connie. It was nearly a mile to the cottage, and Connie Senior was well read by Connie Junior by the time the gamekeeper's picturesque little home was in sight. The child was already as full to the brim with tricks as the little monkey, and so self-assured. At the cottage the door stood open, and there was a rattling heard inside. Connie lingered. The child slipped her hand and ran indoors. Gran, Gran, why are you back already? The grandmother had been blackening the stove. It was Saturday morning. She came to the door in a sacking apron, a black lead brush in her hand and a black smudge on her nose. She was a little, rather dry woman. Why? Whatever she said, hastily wiping her arm across her face as she saw Connie standing outside. "Good morning," said Connie. She was crying, so I just brought her home." The grandmother looked around swiftly at the child. "Why? Where's your dad?" The little girl clung to her grandmother's skirt and simpered. "He was there," said Connie, "but he shot a poaching cat and the child was upset." "Oh, you'd no right bothered, Lady Chatterley. I'm sure it's very good of you, but you shouldn't have bothered. Why, did you ever see?" And the old woman turned to the child. "Fancy Lady Chatterley taking all that trouble over you. Why, she shouldn't have bothered." "It was no bother, just a walk," said Connie, smiling. "Why, I'm sure 'twas very kind of you, I must say." So she was crying. "I knew there'd be something afore they'd got far. She's frightened of him, that's what's it. Sees are almost a stranger to her, fair a stranger, and I don't think their two has hit it off ever easy. He's got funny ways." Connie didn't know what to say. "Look, Gran," simpered the child. The old woman looked down at the sixpence in the little girl's hand. "And sixpence and all? Oh, your ladyship, you shouldn't. Why, isn't Lady Chatterley good to you? My word, you're a lucky girl this morning." She pronounced the name as all the people did. "Chatterley. Isn't Lady Chatterley good to you?" Connie couldn't help looking at the old woman's nose, and the letter again vaguely ripped her face with the back of her wrist, but missed the smudge. Connie was moving away. "Well, thank you ever so much, Lady Chatterley, I'm sure. Say thank you to Lady Chatterley." This last was said to the child. "Thank you," piped the child. "There's a dear," laughed Connie, and she moved away, saying, "Good morning," heartily relieved to get away from the contact. Curious, she thought, that thin, proud man should have that little sharp woman for a mother. And the old woman, as soon as Connie had gone, rushed to the bit of mirror in the scullery and looked at her face. Seeing it, she stamped her foot with impatience. Of course, she had to catch me in my coarse apron and a dirty face. Nice idea, she'd get me off. Connie went slowly round to Rugby. Home. It was a warm word to use for that great, wary Warren. But then, it was a word that had its day. It was somehow cancelled. All the great words, it seemed to Connie, were cancelled for her generation. Love, joy, happiness, home, mother, father, husband, all these great dynamic words were half dead now and dying from day to day. Home was a place you lived in. Love was a thing you didn't fool yourself about. Joy was a word you applied to a good Charleston. Happiness was a term of hypocrisy used to bluff other people. A father was an individual who enjoyed his own existence. A husband was a man you lived with and kept going in spirits. As for sex, the last of the great words, it was just a cocktail term for an excitement that bucked you up for a while, then left you more raggy than ever, frayed. It was as if the very material you were made of was cheap stuff and was fraying out to nothing. All that really remained was a stubborn stoicism, and in that there was a certain pleasure, in the very experience of the nothingness of life, phase after phase, tape after tape. There was a certain grisly satisfaction. So that's that. Always this was the last utterance. Home, love, marriage, Michaelese. So that's that. And when one died, the last words to life would be, so that's that. Listen to the next episode of Lady Chatterley's Lover. We've just met the keeper's child. Who's next? Listen to the next episode of Lady Chatterley's Lover. This is Morel Bernard saying, see you soon.